Hello and welcome. Thank you very much for watching this. I'm John Fisher. I'm a chartered occupational psychologist working within a broadly constructivist position. So Dialogical Self fits really comfortably into what I do, how I do it, and where my interests lie. Had the pleasure of being at a couple of Dialogical Self conferences over the last few years, and thought it would be nice just to share a little bit about one of the ways in which I use some of the tools models within Dialogical Self. So this is actually the I positions self-perception that I'm going to talk about, and how I've used it with an 8-day training course that I designed and delivered for a variety of companies and industries that really went across the world, the course. Couple of years ago now. So a little bit about the course, I suppose, before I start, just on how I used I positions within the work. And it's in many ways, it was there to check and to explore change. One of my areas of interest is change management. So this was one way to look at people's perceptional change over the course of, in this instance, usually 4 to 6 months. So the set up with 6 modules, but it was actually usually run in 4 2-day blocks with about a month, 6 weeks between each of the blocks. So the first 2 days was an orientation, a bit about learning styles, a little bit about the organization, the business they were in, where they fit, and then a day on communications. And it was effectively at the start of this first day that I gave them the I positions to have a look at and to explore and to map. Module 2, that was then 2 days on leading teams, so about team leader, leadership, and some of those skills and techniques within that. Module 3 was 2 days, a day on change management and conflict management. And then the second day was on coaching. And then we had 2 days together that was just some of the more pragmatic, practical elements. So the health and safety, quality control, continuous improvement, and how we can take that to the next level. And then it was right at the end of the last day that I gave them another I position sheet for them to fill in, and for them to look at and to explore. So what I did was I adapted some of the I positions that comes from some of the books that had been written. And going back in 2010, I had the pleasure of seeing Hubert, Agnesta and Tom Voigt in a conference doing some workshops, and had a chat with Tom as part of it, and looked at really how can I adapt this, what can I do. So I adapted this list of I positions, and then gave all of the candidates this list, and really gave them a blank sheet of paper, gave them this list, and asked them to identify those I positions that they felt represented them and that they felt were important to them. And then I asked them to really draw a circle on the sheet of paper, and on that write down those I positions that were important to them. And the closer to the center of the circle, the more important the I positions were. The closer to the periphery, the less important they were. So linking in a little bit, I suppose, with Hubert's concept of the positioner, or using one I position to influence, affect other I positions. So this is an example of one of the sheets I got back from the first time round. And here I also gave people permission to add other I positions if they thought they were other ones that were important. And as we see here, this person added in the central circle, number 81, I am wanting to be better. Now, this person was the only one that actually drew concentric circles as part of what they were doing and what they were giving back. Now, I then took this away and did not show them this when I showed them their second one. So they came into both of them blind, as it were, and then I wanted to look at what those changes were and how those changes had happened and what had happened. So this is one that I got back, and as we can see here from this person, their first one was fairly widely spread around the whole circle, fairly compact towards the center, and just use the center one. Their second one at the end of the course showed some very similar sort of pattern in still quite centered, but within this we've got quite a few that I picked up as different. So this one lost the competitor, but found themselves to be more self-confident, saw themselves as a leader, coach, etc. And all of these new elements came in potentially as a result of the exercises, the work and everything that we'd done on the course. Another one here, quite an interesting one with a lot of outliers around one side and then a relatively tight central bunch. And just it's worth saying here, I've also used this within one-to-one coaching as well, where I'd explore why they placed them, where they placed them, what the significance was about all the ones on the outlier, and why on that sort of right-hand side from 2 o'clock round to just gone 6 o'clock. So I've used it in that way as well. And with this person, their second one really looked different in many ways. The outliers more horse show and in a totally different position, and moving more into the center is more important. And circled them all this time, whether that was they were bored or not, I never quite got to the bottom of. But they lost as being less important things like winner or loser, strong giver, etc. And they added in more of being free, an adventurer, a fighter and a pessimist all came more to the center. So again, in coaching, I'd be exploring why that was, what had happened with that and what the meaning of that was. One last one as a fascinating one. Half a dozen just going up in a very straight linear line that became more fan-shaped. So for me as a constructivist, implying a little bit of a loosening of those constructs. They weren't as tight as they were before, and a lot more of them. So we'd opened their eyes to other facets of themselves and to other areas of strengths. And this person lost a lot of those anxious competitor. Interestingly, dealer with conflict, really important, but now became proud, ambitious, change agent, etc. So lots of changes within how they perceived themselves and what they perceived as part of their core identity. What I did as well with a couple of colleagues is we looked at all of those I statements and we looked at how do we perceive them? Do we perceive them as a positive? Do we perceive them as neutral? Or do we perceive them as negative? So we effectively did a variation of the Q sorting. We all went away. We identified our perception of whether they were positive, negative or neutral. We then came back together again as a team and discussed them, and the ones we all agreed on, we just left within that. And then the ones that we had maybe 3 difference or 2 and a 1, we discussed and came to an agreed notification of just how we saw them, just to help give a bit of clarity and to help give another window on how we looked at the mindset, how we looked at these things. So these are the ones that we decided were the most relevant, that then would influence my coaching with these people afterwards around their perception of them and how do they see them. Because of course, just because we saw them all in this way doesn't mean everybody does. And it's another way of getting into their perception of their I selves and how they can use them and what they can do with them. As a broad brush, just from that overall experiment with that 8-day course and the work that I did from that, some of these didn't change as we went through. So the ones that didn't change were taker, depressive, ashamed, lonely, restless, seeker, and disillusioned. But the ones that did change, that changed whenever they were used, were around enthusiastic, competitor, etc. So just a little bit of movement there. And one of the things I did as part of a paper I gave on this at one of the Dialogical Self conferences was I looked at hot and cold numbers. So where did people see themselves more alike, and where did people see themselves differently within? So hopefully you found that a useful little session or overview on just one of the ways I've used the I selves to explore change and to use it as a way with a specific intervention, and to use it as a way to give me a window to then use in one-on-one conversation, discussion, coaching with these people to look to how can they develop more. Thank you very much, and enjoy your dialogical self.